Despite using hundreds of Tiger tanks in battle in 1943, the German army was in full retreat on the Eastern Front. The Soviet winter offensive was successful in breaking the 900-day siege of Leningrad in January 1944. After a period of regrouping, the Soviets resumed their offensive in February, forcing the Germans back to a poorly fortified defensive front called the Panther Line. The Germans now stood on the river Narva in Estonia to await the next Soviet onslaught. Here, the 3rd SS Panzer Corps set up defensive positions across an 11-kilometer front line east of the town of Narva. This front line was strong and viciously defended by the Panzer Corps. The Germans started destroying bridges and rail lines as they withdrew to the Panther defense line. Heavy Panzer Battalion 502 was sent back into action to cover the German retreat from Leningrad. Their first battle did not go well. The first company of Tiger tanks were overwhelmed by pursuing Soviet armor and destroyed. Among the fallen was Tiger Platoon Commander Lieutenant Meyer, who took his own life when the Soviets attempted to take him prisoner. On February 16, 1944, Carius' 2nd Company was sent to Colonel Wengler of the 227th Infantry Division, defending the Narva front. Colonel Wengler educated him on the situation. The Red Army was relentless in their offensives and positional combat over the ice of the Narva River. They continuously attacked across the ice, without regard to losses, and formed bridgeheads on the German positions. These positions had to be wiped out with immediate counterattacks, or the Soviet bridgeheads would constantly expand and get stronger and stronger. The mission of Carius' Tiger tanks was to support the German infantrymen in throwing out the newly arrived Red Army troops from the occupied German trenches. It was in this positional warfare that Carius got considerable practice in infantry support. The Tiger platoon's tactics was to spearhead the counterattack by approaching within 50 meters of the Soviet-held trenches. The Tiger tanks will pummel a horizontal segment of up to 20 meters wide of trenches with direct cannon and MG fire. While they were pinning down and inflicting losses on the Soviet defenders, this allowed German assault infantry to storm into close combat range with the Soviets. The German infantry would signal the Tiger tanks to hold their fire while they mopped up the remnants of the Soviet defenders. After this 20-meter section of the trench system was cleared, the Tiger tanks and the German assault infantry would repeat the same exact process on other segments of the Soviet defense. While Carius and his Tigers were busy retaking lost positions, the Soviet 8th Army advanced to the point where on 23 February they created 2 bridgeheads facing the Germans, called the East Sack and the West Sack. These salients were staging areas for offensive operations that threatened to destroy the German front line. A drive to the coast would create an encirclement of multiple German formations around the strategic city of Narva. To prevent their collective downfall, the 502nd Heavy Tank Battalion deployed 4 Tigers against the Soviet-held West Sack and 2 Tigers against the Soviet-held East Sack. Among these 2 Tiger tanks was Lieutenant Otto Carius and his wingman Kershaw, 2 of the best Tiger tank crews in the German army. The 502nd Heavy Panzer Battalion was already very experienced at this point, reporting over 500 enemy tanks knocked out in its combat history. Supporting the Tiger tanks are remnants of the decimated German 61st Infantry Division. The division was holding an overextended front with only 15% of their fighting strength left standing. This extremely stressful form of deployment of Tiger tanks from Army Assault Reserve to defeating German infantrymen at the front was typical on the Eastern Front and forms the basis of most Tiger tank operations in World War II. The Tigers and the remnants of the German frontline fighters would be fighting in battles with enemies that massively outnumbered them in men and material. The German position stopping the Soviet-held salients East Sack and West Sack from advancing was critical. They guarded the main supply roads and communications to the 3rd SS Panzer Corps fighting in Narva. The destruction of these defenses and their occupation by the Red Army would lead to the defeat of the Narva garrison. Historically, the 3rd SS Panzer Corps fought extremely hard to keep the Soviets from taking the city and fought multiple battles there. Otto Carius and his 2 Tigers with 75 men guarded approximately 1 kilometer of front line in the East Sac defense sector. The men occupied Lembitu in 3 settlements. So Carius and his wingman Kershaw, along with 75 surviving infantrymen, were assigned very important roles. They were holding an exposed frontline strongpoint to ensure the Germans survive in Estonia and hold Narva. Behind them was the regimental headquarters of the 61st Infantry Division, occupied by Major Haas with only 25 men. Major Haas was in command of the remnants of 2 infantry battalions, which had only 150 men left combined. In the coming battle, he would be responsible for coordinating a ridiculously small trickle of reinforcements and artillery support to the surviving Germans, and eventually have to lead a final desperate counterattack himself. General Molo, who was sent by the High Command to maintain order in the retreating Army Group North, visited Carius. To encourage their power as a resistance, Molo told Carius, "I am holding you personally responsible that no Soviet tank breaks through. None of your Tiger tanks may be lost due to enemy fire. We need every single barrel here." The coming battle will be a centerpiece in Otto Carius' memoir, Tigers in the Mud, originally published in 1960. Hayao Miyazaki, the legendary animator, filmmaker, and manga artist of films such as My Neighbor Totoro and Spirited Away, would read Carius' book. Miyazaki drew a manga based on Carius' recollections. He would travel to Germany to visit Otto Carius personally and take this photograph. For more research, Miyazaki visited the battlegrounds in the late 1990s that Carius' Tiger platoon fought for, mainly in the village of Lembitu and East Sac in Estonia. It was a beautiful place, and he found all of the key locations of the battle, including Major Haas's regimental command post and the 3 ruins where the Germans and Soviets fought so desperately over. Miyazaki's collaboration with Otto Carius produced Tigers Hidden in Mud. Instead of drawing the Germans and the Soviets as humans, they were drawn as pigs in order to soften the carnage. The art style is not too dissimilar to Miyazaki's pig in his film Porco Rosso. What this 33-page manga provides are lots of details from the Tiger Commander Carius in visual form. This is due to the talent of Miyazaki and his work in surveying the battlefield. It provides the visual details of the fighting and battle zone in a way that only reading after-action reports or personal accounts simply cannot. The first panels in the manga concern themselves with the positional warfare and combat reconnaissance before the main battle. It is February 1944, winter. 2nd Lieutenant Carius, platoon commander of the 502nd Heavy Panzer Battalion, conducts routine combat reconnaissance in the German 61st Infantry Division sector on the Narva front. The Red Army has already broken into the division sector and is aiming to expand its bridgehead with further offensive thrusts. These forays into enemy territory was what the German armored units did several times a week on the Eastern Front to probe the enemy, inflict some losses, and gather important intelligence. Carius' half platoon, which is 2 Tigers, drives into a Soviet trench system on top of a rail line. This is guarded by concealed anti-tank artillery. Like many German soldiers, Carius comments that the Red Army infantrymen were tough opponents who built field works very quickly and were experts at camouflage. They did this even in temperatures of 20 below Celsius. The 2 sides exchanged fire. The 2 Tiger tanks knocked out an anti-tank gun and withdraw from the battlefield. At this point in the action, 2nd Lieutenant Carius is 21 years old, is suffering from frostbite and infested with lice. He has not washed his face or brushed his teeth in a very long time. His face is completely blackened with oil and dirt. The temperatures drop below -20 Celsius, The inside of the tank is like an icebox. Despite the danger, Tiger crews burn kerosene lamps into their tanks to prevent frostbite. The lamps make everything inside the tank covered in ash, including the crews. The German Tiger tank crews were extremely dirty due to being on guard duty or in combat for weeks. The wells were frozen and there was a shortage of water for personal hygiene. There wasn't even water to wash their faces or a place to light a fire. No one was sick, but all of the tankers had swollen feet and legs. A few men had already cut open their boots to get relief. The Tiger tank men couldn't take off their boots, because otherwise they couldn't even put them on again. The Soviets deployed loudspeakers at the front and harassed the German soldiers in their trenches with psychological warfare. The Soviets already know that their enemy is Carius, the Tiger tank commander. The Soviets asked the German infantry to surrender Carius to them in exchange for 30 prisoners of war. But no one falls for it. The Soviets never stopped their psychological operations and continue long after this battle. Later that day, the Soviet infantry launches a fixing attack of their own, with a swarm of infantrymen attacking through a muddy field. The attack disoriented the Germans, and they only stopped it by forming a thin defensive line. Even during positional warfare, the Red Army's unique deployment of hyperactive fixing attacks was a typical feature of combat on the Eastern Front. Carius' half platoon drives back to base. His unit, 2nd Company of 502nd Heavy Panzer Battalion, only has 6 Tiger tanks available out of an establishment strength of 14 Tigers. According to Carius, the average infantry company has only 20 to 25 men with only 2 machine guns each. In comparison, the full-strength German infantry company could be anywhere between 200 to 150 men. Among the German survivors are new replacements, generally from the division's replacement battalion or independent march companies and battalions sent in by higher commands. These are young and inexperienced soldiers fresh out of basic training with limited combat value. The sector assigned to Carius' Tiger tank platoon was a settlement of 3 farmhouses guarding a rail line in front of the Soviet-held East Sac. The defense forces were pitiful. These infantry were holding 1 kilometer of front line against superior Soviet forces getting ready to destroy them. These Germans had no anti-tank artillery and relied on the power of their Tiger tanks. In the desperate fighting to come, only 30 German grenadiers or infantrymen would be left standing. Carius' Tiger tanks would prove decisive for the ability of these men to hold the front and provide security for the decimated 61st Infantry Division. It is so cold that the German soldiers crowd around the heating stove. They watch the Soviets across the rail line prepare vigorously for the offensive operation. Tiger Commander Carius performs ground reconnaissance on foot and crawls on his belly, observing the suitability of the terrain and memorizing terrain features. Carius and his 2 Tiger tanks hide behind a barn. The young replacement infantry marvel at seeing a 57-ton Tiger tank for the first time. The Soviets detect the Tigers, and Soviet forward observers launch mortar strikes against the 75 German infantrymen and 2 Tiger tanks. The mechanically sensitive Tiger takes 15 minutes to warm up while under indirect fire. Lieutenant Carius moves his Tigers 700 meters away from the settlement and into concealment. He joins a war council with the infantry commanders, and they form a game plan. In the daytime, the Tigers move up to the front to guard the 1 kilometer front line. At night, the 2 Tigers pull back, and the infantry takes over the defensive duty. 75 infantry and 2 Tiger tanks defending 1 kilometer of front line. This type of desperate situation was commonplace in the second half of World War II, as Germany was losing the war. The losses were so severe that despite millions of reinforcements and a steady flow of new divisions coming into the Eastern Front, they were unable to rebuild and maintain their frontline army to a healthy level of combat power. The next day, the 2 Tigers receive a messenger that reports Soviet snipers are hidden in the treetops. Carius maneuvers his half platoon forward and neutralizes the threat with his coaxial machine guns. He comments that even when fighting snipers, he sticks out his head halfway to observe the fire. Situational awareness is very important for Tiger tanks, as the driver position is relatively blind and the vision slits provide only limited visibility from inside the tank. The Tiger commander is the most important eyes and ears of the crew. Carius and his wingman Kershaw race back to base at 40 kilometers an hour. Nightfall. As the German infantry take over, the Tiger crews get to work on maintenance and inspection of their mechanically sensitive vehicles. They also refuel and rearm their vehicle with pumps from the battalion logistics company. Tiger Ace Alfred Rubel of the 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion says that for every 1 hour of Tiger tank combat operations, there is 10 hours of work to keep these beasts running. The two exhausted Tiger tank crews go to sleep on a storage mound infested with lice. In the days to come, guarding the front line was rather miserable work. The Tiger crews could not leave their Tiger tanks, or else risk getting individually targeted. So they huddled inside the freezing Tiger, which stunk of oil and human stink all day long. During the daytime, they couldn't even leave the tank, so they went to the bathroom and emptied 88mm shells, whose contents froze over in the terrible cold. When the Tiger men came out of their tanks, they were dirty and smelled absolutely terrible. Meanwhile, the Soviets worked day and night preparing for their offensive operations. A storm was coming. Thanks so much for watching. Please help out this channel by liking, subscribing, and ringing the notification bell. Comment below on what you think about Miyazaki's Tiger Tank comic.